Hello everyone, and thank you for attending our session here at LIAO VR 2026. Today, I am honored to present our research titled, When Effort Becomes Visible, Facet-Level Shifts in Evaluation and Workload During VR Teamwork. As collaborative virtual reality expands beyond simple entertainment into professional training, education, and enterprise workplaces, we are seeing a rise in complex virtual workspaces. In these environments, system designers often include UI elements, like name tags, progress bars, or individual dashboards, to show everyone what their teammates are doing. Our research asks a fundamental question: when we make individual effort visible to the group, how does that actually change the psychological experience and the performance of the user? We discovered that surfacing this information does a lot more than just inform. It fundamentally reshapes the social pressure and workload experience during teamwork. To understand this, we need to look at the concept of social translucence. This principle suggests that making social information visible facilitates awareness and better team coordination. However, visibility alters the social situation itself. This creates a dual tension for VR designers. On one hand, classic theories like social comparison theory suggest that showing a fast-paced peer sets a descriptive norm that individuals will try to match. Showing everyone's contributions can also prevent social loafing, because when people feel anonymous, they tend to reduce their effort. On the other hand, making effort visible can induce social evaluative load. Evaluation apprehension theory warns us that being observable increases arousal and the fear of being judged, which can actually impair performance on complex tasks or introduce unnecessary mental stress. So, does visibility help synchronize teams, or does it just stress them out? Despite these established psychological theories, prior studies on immersive teamwork have a significant limitation. They rarely isolate the social channel. Many previous VR experiments manipulated social presence by adding expressive avatars, spatial audio, or denser scene geometry. The problem is that these additions confound social signals with environmental rendering load. When a user's workload increases in these studies, it is entirely unclear whether the effect stems from the social pressure of seeing peer effort, or simply from the cognitive and visual load of a more complex rendering environment. Because of this gap, we still lack definitive evidence about whether visibility amplifies, substitutes for, or interacts with normative tempo. To address this, we asked, does making peer effort visible, or introducing a high peer pace, elevate social evaluative load? And does effort identifiability interact with peer pace to shift individual tempo? To definitively answer these questions, we developed a confound-controlled platform called Trace VR. The brilliance of this platform is that it holds the scene layout, object physics, task rules, and trial timing absolutely constant across all conditions. We implemented a 2x2 within subject's design, orthogonally manipulating two isolated social factors. First is effort identifiability. In the individually traceable condition, a dashboard displays per agent performance metrics, showing exactly who is moving, how fast. In the anonymous condition, the UI is identical in size and placement, but it only displays a trial countdown timer, hiding the performance metrics. The second factor is peer effort, or pace. We manipulated the pushing speed of the scripted virtual agents to be either high or low, without changing their appearance, their assigned routes, or the environment. This cleanly separates accountability cues from normative tempo. We recruited 32 participants for this study. Each participant entered a simulated warehouse environment, and was placed in a team of 10, comprising 1 real participant and 9 scripted co-actors. The task was highly specific. Individually transport 16 crates along a self-chosen path between fixed pickup and drop-off points, all within a strict 3-minute time limit. To ensure that changes in a participant's pace reflected an intentional cognitive strategy rather than just physical motor fluctuations, we decoupled movement speed from the joystick tilt. Participants steered with the joystick, but they had to consciously press the Y or X buttons on their controller to increase or decrease their walking speed. After each trial, participants completed questionnaires measuring intrinsic motivation, social load, and the NASA TLX workload, followed by a semi-structured interview. Let's dive into the behavioral results. We evaluated the completion rate, where the participants successfully delivered all 16 crates before the 3-minute timer ran out. we found that both identifiability and high peer pace modestly increased completion rates. However, they acted as partial substitutes rather than strict complements. What do I mean by that? When the peer pace was very slow, making individual effort identifiable provided the largest uplift in pass rates. Conversely, when the dashboard was completely anonymous, exposing participants to high-paced peers provided the largest uplift. But here is the most fascinating behavioral finding. To check if these social cues simply made people move faster, we calculated a seconds per box metric for all finishers. The median speed was exactly 15.0 seconds per box across all 4 conditions. Our social manipulations did not alter the fundamental execution speed. Instead, they acted as threshold movers. They chiefly determined who was motivated enough to finish within the time limit, rather than how fast the finishers actually moved. If the fundamental physical speed didn't change, what happened to their psychological experience? Interestingly, the composite, global NASA TLX workload score remained comparable across all conditions. However, we observed critical shifts at the facet level. The feeling of being monitored, and the feeling of temporal demand, depended entirely on how our variables were combined. For example, making dashboards identifiable raised perceived monitoring primarily when peer pace was low, but when peer pace was high, identifiable dashboards significantly amplified time pressure, or temporal demand. We also looked at intrinsic motivation. Contrary to the common assumption that seeing faster peers uniformly inspires and motivates users, our data showed the opposite. Participants reported significantly higher perceived competence under low peer pace. Pushing people with fast-paced virtual peers did not make them feel more motivated. It often just degraded their self-rated performance. To understand why we saw these specific psychological shifts, we analyzed the post-task interviews, which revealed 2 critical boundary mechanisms. First is timer-induced pressure. Irrespective of the social dashboards or the virtual teammates, the countdown clock exerted its own independent pressure. Participants explicitly stated that the timer acted almost like a quasi-audience. It induced a baseline sense of urgency and of being evaluated, even when they weren't looking at the per-person metrics. Second is the parity-dependent uptake of norms. We found that competitiveness in VR is strictly conditional on parity. The normative influence of peers only worked when users felt their own pace was comparable to the virtual agents. If a user felt they were significantly faster or significantly slower than the group, their motivation to track others and keep up completely diminished. Based on these findings, we outlined several tempo-aware and accountability-aware guidelines for VR developers. First, use accountability to lift slow norms, and use ambient norms to soften anonymity. Second, tune pressure at the facet level, not globally. For example, at high team speeds, prefer aggregated or delayed personal widgets to reduce temporal demand. Third, personalize by parity, detect the user norm gap, and adapt UI cues so you don't demotivate users who are either far behind or far ahead. In conclusion, we frame identifiability and peer pace as partially substitutable levers for shaping social evaluative experience and facet-level motivation in VR. They act as threshold movers, increasing completion rates without necessarily accelerating already capable finishers. Thank you to our participants, our funding agencies, and to you for your attention. I invite you to read our full paper for deeper insights, and I am happy to answer any questions.